Morning sunlight rolled across the northern mountain ranges of Eidolon Reach while waterfalls thundered through the cliffs surrounding Kenny's hidden sanctuary. 3 months ago, the area had been wilderness. Now it breathed with quiet life. Hidden underground dawn fruit chambers glowed beneath the mountains. Mist runners moved freely through forest tunnels. Stormbacks wandered the valley systems below, while settlers carefully built new districts further south. And above all of it, Kenny trained. The mountain clearing outside his cave had become a brutal practice ground carved directly into the cliffs themselves. Broken stone pillars surrounded the arena, while deep scars cut through rock from years of Eclipse combat instincts refusing to leave his body. Darius stood opposite Kenny beneath the morning light while both held practice blades. Rissel watched lazily from a nearby tree branch chewing stolen dawn fruit. Pines, meanwhile, sat atop one of the broken pillars wearing dark security armor far too proudly. Across the chest plate someone had engraved, "Head of Fruit Defense." Lyra looked at it once, then decided arguing was pointless. Darius slowly circled Kenny with the training blade lowered. "You are still too direct sometimes." Kenny rotated one of his daggers through the air beside him. "You taught me patience." "No." The uncle smirked slightly. "Eclipse taught you patience." Then suddenly Darius attacked. Fast. Much faster than most people his age should move. The practice blade cut toward Kenny's shoulder while the older man pivoted aggressively through the mountain dust. Kenny moved instantly. One floating dagger phased between them, deflecting the strike, while Kenny himself slipped sideways, rotating behind Darius with terrifying smoothness. The older man smiled immediately. "There." Kenny paused. Darius pointed toward him. "That." The uncle lowered his practice weapon. "You move nothing like a rain." Pines shouted proudly from the pillar. "Because he is cooler." Lyra physically threw a rock at him. Darius ignored them. The dynasty style always focused on domination. He stepped slowly around Kenny while speaking. Heavy pressure, sword control, precision intimidation. The uncle demonstrated several old rain movements through the air. Controlled, disciplined, violent. Then he gestured toward Kenny. "But you." The floating daggers slowly rotated around Kenny like hunting animals fight like a storm trying to think. Silence. Pines blinked once. That was actually poetic as hell. Kenny looked toward his uncle quietly. "You hate the style?" Darius immediately shook his head. "No." A faint smile crossed his face. "I think you are the first Rain in generations who fights honestly." The mountain wind rolled softly through the clearing. Darius folded his arms. "Every Rain before you learned combat as identity." Another pause. "Your father fights to dominate rooms before battles even begin." The uncle gestured toward Kenny's daggers. "But you fight to survive." That sentence sat heavily between them, because it was true. Everything Kenny learned inside Eclipse came from survival. Improvisation, movement, unpredictability, adaptation. No pride, no elegance, just survival refined into art. Darius looked genuinely curious now. "How did you create this style?" Kenny remained quiet for several moments, then finally answered. "I got tired of fighting people who already knew how a rain moved." The floating dagger beside him phased through a stone pillar before rematerializing behind Darius. The uncle noticed immediately. Kenny continued calmly. "Eclipse punished predictability. The mountain clearing quieted. So I stopped fighting like my family." Pines pointed dramatically. "That goes unbelievably hard." Lyra sighed. "You say that about everything, because everything he says sounds like a movie trailer." Darius laughed quietly. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened slightly. "Your mother would have loved that answer." Kenny looked away briefly after hearing that. The training continued for hours afterward. Steel clashed across stone. Daggers phased through the air. Dust rolled through the clearing beneath twin suns. And throughout it all, Darius quietly educated Kenny on the real history of House Rain. Not the public version. The truth. How the dynasty originally began as protectors during the early expansion wars. How fear slowly replaced honor. How Cashin transformed the family into something colder after losing entire worlds during rebellions decades earlier. The glamour books speak about strength. Darius blocked one of Kenny's strikes before continuing, but they never mentioned paranoia, another clash, or the political purges. Steel scraped hard against stone, or the worlds erased quietly because they resisted rain control. Kenny listened silently while fighting. Every answer confirmed the same thing deeper and deeper. House Rain was rotten, not broken, rotten. By midday, the training finally stopped. Pines immediately collapsed dramatically into the grass nearby. I watched all that and somehow became exhausted. Lyra sat beside him drinking water. You did nothing. I supervised spiritually. Then suddenly, Rissel froze. The Mistrunner's glowing eyes narrowed sharply toward the forests beyond the cliffs. Kenny noticed instantly. The floating daggers stopped moving lazily. Now they hovered perfectly still, dangerously still. Darius immediately sensed it too. What is it? The forest below them quieted unnaturally. No birds, no wind. Then Kenny vanished. Not literally, just fast enough to almost seem impossible. The phase daggers shot through the trees below while mountain branches exploded apart violently. Pines jumped upright instantly. What happened? Then the gunfire started. Suppressed rounds tore through the forest beneath the cliffs, while one of Kenny's daggers ripped through a hidden sniper nest buried within the trees. Blood sprayed across silver leaves. Lyra drew weapons immediately. Darius's expression darkened. Assassin. The mountain clearing erupted into motion. 3 hidden figures burst from the forests wearing adaptive camouflage armor designed specifically for covert planetary infiltration. Professional, military grade. One charged directly toward Kenny wielding twin plasma blades. Another fired magnetic rounds toward the cave entrance. The third attempted retreat instantly. Bad choice. Kenny's floating dagger phased directly through the fleeing assassin's spine before returning to his side covered in blood. The remaining attacker reached Kenny. Fast. Elite. The plasma blade screamed through the air toward Kenny's throat, then suddenly stopped. The assassin froze completely. One of Kenny's daggers hovered directly through the man's skull. The phase blade slowly rematerialized inside his head, dead instantly. Silence crashed over the mountains afterward. Only the waterfall still moved. Pines slowly lowered his weapon. Well, Lyra scanned the forests carefully. Are there more? Darius moved toward the dead assassin near the clearing edge, then suddenly froze. His expression changed instantly. Not fear, recognition. The uncle slowly knelt beside the corpse, pulling aside the tactical mask, then quietly whispered, "No." Kenny approached calmly. "What?" Darius looked up toward him. His face had gone pale. "That is Cain Velros." Silence. Pines frowned. "Should we know who that is?" Darius slowly stood. Cain was one of Cassian's top assassins. The mountain winds rolled softly through the clearing. Nobody spoke for several seconds, because the implication hit all of them immediately. This was not random. Not poachers, not spies. House Rain had officially made its first move. Lyra looked toward Kenny carefully, watching for anger, shock, emotion. But Kenny simply stared at the corpse silently. Then finally, he nodded once. No rage, no breakdown. Just certainty. Good. Darius blinked slightly. Good? Kenny looked toward the forests below the mountains. At least now I know forgiveness is not an option. The floating daggers slowly rotated beside him. Cold, controlled. My way is the set way now. Silence settled heavily across the clearing, and somewhere far away beyond the stars, House Rain had unknowingly crossed the line that guaranteed its eventual destruction.